Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoy the networking sessions. Now we are going to have Lauren D'Amico, which I'm going to introduce in a few seconds. All right, so Lauren D'Amico is a data coaching and capacity building manager for the Build for Zero data team at Community Solutions, a company that wants to eradicate homelessness in the USA. In this role, she helps community to address the technology and data management barriers, preventing the achievement of utilizing quality data to drive efforts to end homelessness. Additionally, her team provides training and support to the other staff in Build for Zero team and the communities, the organizations that are in the service of growing their skills in data analysis and data improvement measurement concepts. That being said, I wanted to welcome to the stage Lauren.
Hi, how are you?
Hello, Lauren. Welcome to. It's good to see you again. I hope that you. I just wanted to start with a brief quote of yours that I really found interesting, and I just wanted to share with everyone. And the quote is, by shifting to analyzing real-time data, we have helped communities raise the bar on how data is used and their power to create homelessness response systems designed to end homelessness. Welcome again, Lauren.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Thank you. So now I'm going to give you the word. If you want to share your screen, go ahead, and then I'll quickly leave the stage and come back for a quick Q&A.
Sure. Just give me a second to...
Sure.
Oh, I think I'm a little lost here. Where's the screen share again? I'm sorry.
Sure, no worries. It's the third button below.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Of course, it's all in different tabs.
No worries.
All right.
Okay, so
thank you so much. Sorry, everyone.
My camera and then come back as soon as you finish introducing Community Solutions and the beautiful work that you're doing there.
Perfect. So Community Solutions really work for a lasting end to homelessness that leaves no one behind. Our origin story, a little bit of our background. Our president and CEO, Roseanne Haggerty, was living in New York City here in the US and actually founded a group called Common Ground Community back in the 1990s. And over the next 20 years, that organization really focused in on creating homes and assisting more than 4,500 people with getting into housing or getting off the streets or helping to improve their situations. And as they were doing this work, as successful as they were with getting people into housing, they identified that that still wasn't necessarily helping the overall homeless population decrease in New York City. So around 2003, they shifted their efforts and really started looking to deploying street outreach teams in around a 20-block radius of Times Square, and really dove in and met with individuals who were experiencing homelessness and living on the streets of New York City, and identified that there was a lot more deeper needs that needed to be met in order to help people sustain the housing once they were able to find placement. So around 2010, this group that had been doing the work in New York City on the street decided to launch a campaign where the initiative and the goal was really bold. It was to house 100,000 homeless individuals directly into housing, so from the streets into housing. And during this time, it was about a 4-year campaign. During this time, Community Solutions sort of evolved into the organization that we are from there, from this 100,000 homes campaign. During that time, The original organization, that Common Ground Community, sort of rebranded and are now operating under a different name. So they're still very much an organization that operates within New York City and is doing great things. But Community Solutions really shifted their focus right around that point of 2010 through 2014. And partly because we learned a lot of really great things from data that helped us sort of shift our focus. So in 2015, we launched, or Community Solutions launched, what we call the Built for Zero initiative. And really what it is, it's a movement of about 80 communities domestically and close to about 10 to 15 communities internationally that are really focused on zeroing in on the issues of homelessness and how to solve it by counting down. And we'll get into that in just a few minutes. So part of the lessons that we learned from sort of that 100,000 Homes campaign was one of the keys to solving homelessness and ending homelessness in communities is, of course, providing housing and getting people who are living on the streets or in emergency shelters or any sort of transitional temporary housing that isn't meant for long-term duration into permanent, stable homes where they can then sort of wrap services around themselves to further treat their needs. And while we had, great success through the 100,000 Homes campaign, in the 4-year period, we definitely exceeded that goal and housed close to 105,000 individuals that were formerly homeless. One of the things that we noticed and we learned from looking at the data from that time period was, although communities that were involved in that initiative we're seeing great success in increasing housing placements and getting more people into housing on a monthly and yearly basis, we weren't seeing a significant drop in the overall homeless population totals. So although we were housing more people, we were still seeing people living in emergency shelters and on the street increasing. So this really helped us shift our thinking and understanding around the data that we were using. So through that 100,000 Homes campaign, we were counting up and really looking at measuring outputs and trying to achieve success through by utilizing and pulling those levers on those outputs. What we really needed and helped to sharpen around 2015 was getting to a measurable outcome and a clearly defined end state that would help us say and determine and measure progress as we were helping communities actually make reductions in their homeless population. So rather than counting up and increasing sort of those output measures, we really started shifting that focus to counting down and understanding what challenges we're presenting in a community's total active homeless population. To do this, we work in part with a lot of improvement advisors and pull in, we have great partnership with some of our federal partners and our local and state governments. But essentially, we understood that local skills require local solutions. So each community, as unique as they are, have required just a slight modification on maybe a best practice or something we learned from another community. So we really help and rely on our data analytics and measuring the data that we're receiving from communities on a monthly basis to help us identify and target areas that we could try to test some change ideas for improvements. And really pulling in a human-centered design to help make sure that we're engaging people from that population to better understand their needs and sort of where those gaps in the systems are. We use that quality improvement foundation to really drive the success of these changes and making sure that communities really understand and are able to sort of solidify that a test idea or a piece of their system that they wanted to work on was generated the outcome that they were hoping to achieve. And that, of course, requires a lot of facilitation and making sure that you really have everyone who needs to be at the table in your community at that table, helping to staff those cases. So in part of shifting from sort of counting just one kind of measure, looking at those housing placements, we really opened up ourselves up to looking at more dynamic data. So these are, metrics that we capture from communities on a monthly basis. We have them report their total actively homeless numbers. So that's really looking at how many people on a monthly basis at the end of the month are experiencing homelessness in your community. And what we try to help them understand is, when you get to that number at the last day of the month, how many people sort of inflowed into your system or came onto your list, and really understanding where they came from. Were they newly identified? Is this the first time they're experiencing homelessness? Are these individuals that maybe have lost their housing in a previous situation for whatever reason and are finding themselves becoming homeless again? Or are they individuals that maybe have interacted with the system a few months ago, but for whatever reason disengaged and now are coming back to receive more services? So it really helps us understand where people are coming from. And on the flip side, we really also want to measure and understand where people are moving out of the system too, because that's our main focus, right? Is getting people into stable housing. So of course, we're going to measure housing placements. And we're going to help communities understand within a given month how many people are going inactive or disengaging with the system for various reasons. And then there's a small criteria of population that may no longer meet that definition or that criteria that qualifies them as a particular subpopulation of one of the homeless categories that we track. But together, these 7 metrics really help us paint a picture of how a community's system, their overall system, including that data infrastructure system, is functioning in terms of a balance and in terms of being able to track individuals from the time that they're identified through the process of getting them into housing to the point that they're housed. And of course, through the years that we've had this Built for Zero initiative up and running, we've had a lot of success. We have currently about 80 communities domestically here in the United States, 13 of which have ended veteran or chronic homelessness within their communities. So those are 2 of the population categories that we track. Since the beginning of Built for Zero, nearly 125,000 homeless individuals have been housed. So we've helped communities move people into housing, and we're really proud of that. We've had 79 communities reach what we consider quality data, which is essentially the point where we are confident, and also more importantly, the community is confident that their system that they're measuring is robust and really capturing everyone that's experiencing homelessness in their communities. So I'm going to pause there and switch back to the main view if we want to.
Yes, if you want, you can still keep sharing the slides. I think there is one slide that particularly I find really interesting, which is the one that you have all the KPIs. So how do you track the inputs, the outputs? That one, I think it's a really good slide. If you want to keep it, feel free.
Yep, absolutely.
Are
you talking about the monthly metrics?
It is one that is called Shifting to Dynamic Data.
Yes, perfect. Yeah. Let me go back to that screen.
And I just wanted, meanwhile, also to highlight a few points that I found particularly interesting in the work of community solutions that you also mentioned. The first one was the shift that you made in terms of, okay, how do we measure the impact that we are having in the homelessness community? Should we count the number of homeless that are actually getting a house, or should we count instead how many homeless at the end of the day, or at the end of the month in this case, are still in this situation of homelessness? And what you observe was actually the second measure is way more realistic than just counting how many services we are providing. And now we are talking about homelessness, but the same way this would be applicable to providing food or providing shelter or any other variable. So I think this is very important for any NGO or any social project, which is choose the right metrics for you to achieve your goals. Because sometimes the first metrics that come to your mind are not necessarily the ones that you should be looking forward. And I also found very interesting the fact that you understood that each community is different. When we talk about communities, you're talking about homelessness communities, so the associations that help these communities homeless, and that you obviously you cannot provide the same service to each one of them. It requires understanding what are the specific goals of each of these organizations. And lastly, this slide I think synthesizes this point very well, which is how do you measure this? In theory, it's all very simple, but in practice, what are the specific KPIs that you're using? So I just wanted to drive some attention to this. Okay, so regarding a few questions, I wanted to ask you, since considering also the team that you're part of, what do you observe are the typical technology and data management barriers that these NGOs face when they are trying to erase homelessness? Do you remember one or two examples that you could share?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think the most important point that I'd like to make here on this is the data that we're looking at, the data that we're measuring is representing people's lives. It's measuring people who are experiencing a very unique and tragic moment in their lives. So I want to be sensitive to that and also use that as a point to illustrate that we are tracking, person level data. So we are tracking and attempting to measure people as they move through a system of care that sometimes it's difficult to navigate if you don't have the know-how or the skills or support to help sort of navigate through the different paths to housing. With that, we're tracking human data by humans who are interacting and working with these individuals as they're experiencing major crises in their lives. So oftentimes some of the barriers that we have is, boils down to timeliness and data entry and making sure that the data that's being tracked and entered into our database systems is accurate and up to date so that we really can rely on getting a real-time by name list of everyone experiencing homelessness at any given point in a community. I think along with sort of the human error that could sometimes come into play, some of the databases that communities work with aren't necessarily designed to track these data points specifically as standalone data points within their reporting tables. So often we have to work with communities to help them sort of build those bridges and connect different data points that are helping to measure the same things, but just maybe not labeled in that way. So a lot of times it's translating and having the skill level to be able to pull advanced queries or design advanced queries to pull that information out of the databases that they operate within is sometimes challenging for a lot of our communities as well. And then I think that there's just, issues to governance of that data. So data sharing and making sure that, as communities are working towards engaging with their homeless populations and also engaging with the other actors in their communities that are integral parts of that system of care, we have to make sure that as we're building and learning more about each individual person and what interventions may best suit their needs, we need to be conscious and figure out a way to be able to share that data in a way that keeps it protected so that we are ensuring that that person's privacy is kept to the community providers that are actually accessing services and providing services to that individual as they move through the services. So I think those are a lot of the main challenges that we're experiencing or communities experience on a common basis.
And I believe that to solve all these three challenges, I can already assume the amount of work and the amount of care from your team towards these communities that this involves. Because making sure that the databases that they use are accurate and you can actually drive insights from that, making sure that the data is using the best practices in terms of not sharing the personal information from each of the users, and helping them to extract the best information so the right insights from that data. I think these 3 points are really interesting and straight to the point. So my next question is actually, okay, so if these are the challenges and this is how you support them, how do the teams of community solutions collaborate with these communities? Do they meet once a month? Do they meet like every year with these communities? Do they provide them counseling? Do they have what are the dynamics that exist in order for implementing all this knowledge that community solution has?
Yeah, that's a really terrific question. Thank you. I think our team, the Built for Zero team here at Community Solutions, is very fortunate in that we, our coaching team, we call that portfolio the collaborative. The individuals that work directly one-on-one, providing ongoing support with community contacts that are involved in Built for Zero, our improvement advisors, are really the ones that hold a lot of that relationship building with the communities on a regular basis. So typically they're meeting and holding, webinars or video calls or just facilitating meetings on a monthly basis. And they really do a lot of the quality improvement testing, generating ideas, and really helping those communities build out what we call sort of a command center. So they help them develop a core Built for Zero team on the community level that's really charged with taking the reins and leading this effort locally on the ground. My team, the data team, which I'm a part of, sort of comes in and helps support the work of the collaborative and the work of the improvement advisors in very skilled ways. So a lot of the time that my team spends with communities is really focused on data coaching element. So helping to track through what some of those challenges or technical barriers they may be experiencing as they're trying to build out what we refer to as our by name list. So troubleshooting different queries or talking through some ideas around building and using other tools such as Excel or Microsoft Access to help store the information that they need to collect. Other ways that we sort of provide assistance and help is by creating different visualizations and listening to communities and understanding what they need to help advocate or spread this information more broadly through their community networks to, again, generate that building that will and generating that interest around supporting the efforts of local agencies on the ground, kind of trying to do this work to end homelessness in the community. I think the third sort of space that we're entering into over the next couple of years is really now focused on identifying and understanding ways that we can help data teams on the community level. So those that are sort of responsible for the day-to-day data entry or analysis, ensuring that they have the skills and the capacity to meet the needs of that, so that they really have the ability on the ground to do pretty in-depth analysis of their homeless populations, to measure their progress and sort of adjust goals or adjust aims as they continue to learn more information about the unique unique traits of their homeless populations.
That's a really good point, because so basically this point about creating, I would call it ambassadors. So each community, each NGO that is addressing the topic of homelessness, if you are able to train at least one person, especially the person that is, as you say, is responsible for data entry, if you can convert them into an ambassador of how you can extract the right information out of your data, how can you respond to questions that you want to address regarding the population that you're serving. If they become ambassadors, they are not only getting to know the meaning about data analysis, but they are also able to get that value by themselves, even if it's just the basics. It starts with that, and then evolving step by step step, obviously with support. But I think this point about creating these ambassadors is really key. So those are very
I think that's a great analogy. Yes. Yeah.
So my last question was going to say, if you have any, what have you observed from the most successful communities? What are the characteristics of that these communities that are more successful? What characteristics do they have? What are they doing?
That's a great question. I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen for this one.
Sure.
To come back to the main event. So I think some of the characteristics that we've seen in our most successful communities are really begin at the top. So it's really having, you know, the right people at the at the table with you. So ensuring that, you know, I mentioned before that we refer to this as sort of a command center. Often in some of our presentations or some of the work that we've done, we sort of use the analogy of NASA's mission control. So you want a group of people that really have sort of that charge of defining the aims, so the goals that they want to set for a short period of time. We usually do like a 6-month action cycle to really hone in on specific goals that the community wants to try to work on. So having the right people sort of upfront and leading those efforts is one of the characteristics that we see success in. It's also having a lot of support from your local elected officials, so your local government entities, and making sure that they really have a voice at the table and that they are supporting in the ways that they're able to. And really just a robust data infrastructure system that allows you to pull the data that you need to measure on a monthly basis in a timely way, so that you can kind of see and measure your results. Right now, we have a monthly cadence that we have communities report out to us on, but I think our most successful communities are looking at that data more regularly. So they may be looking at it on a weekly basis to sort of assess where they are in the process of meeting their goal. And if they find or see that maybe they are shifting to off track a little bit, what tweaks and adjustments can they make in the moment to try to test to see if that would bring them back into sort of in line with where they'd like to see in achieving the goals that they're outlining at that moment.
Yes,
so
that
very
actually
flexible and nimble.
Say again?
I said that people or communities that are flexible, nimble, and adaptive to the data that they're seeing, and use that to help kind of generate or chart out their new course of action.
Exactly. And a lot of the things that you mentioned actually ring a bell in my head. The last point that you mentioned, but one point that you mentioned about having, so if you're wanting to impact the homelessness community, a lot of times you need to change laws, or you need the support of the government, even if it's the local one. And you mentioned, okay, the leadership being present in the decision making, the community having some connections to have their voices heard in the government. And for sure the technology being a backup for them, because if the technology is a hurdle, there is nothing else that is going to save them. And then the last point of looking regularly to the data. This is a very important one, because sometimes if people collect data, they are just already considered data driven, but it's actually the fact that data is being taken in account for decision making regularly, not just at the end of a lot of months. That actually makes a lot of difference, and it's a good wake-up call for everyone that wants to embark in this journey. All right, thank you so much, Lauren. We are just in time to end our presentation. For me and for the entire team and the audience, it's a pleasure to have you here and hear about the wonderful work that you're doing in Community Solutions. We are praying for that solution also to come to Europe, at least, because it's. I think we will drive a lot of impact in that issue in Portugal as well, and many other countries around the world. So we are hoping for that.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I was really grateful to be a part of this today.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lauren.